Hello and welcome back to Uncovered, where I give you a rapid-fire rundown of the latest titles added to Xbox Game Pass that I won't be covering in First 15. As a reminder, this isn't a ranking or review, I'm just telling you what's new. Starting with Ashen. It's a semi-open world action RPG inspired by the Dark Souls format. It originally released years ago, and the main draw besides it being a fresh take on a Souls-light are the environments and its brighter, more cartoonish visual style. You can play solo, with an AI companion, or with real players who connect through random encounters online, or after you rest at the game's equivalent of a bonfire, not through summoning. You can also set a multiplayer code with a friend so you can only connect with each other. There used to be issues with that system on both console and PC, where real players couldn't connect unless they disabled AI, or they couldn't connect period, or it just didn't seem to work right. I don't know how much of that's been resolved, but it's a system you might benefit from looking up. Beyond that, expect the usual: merchants and NPCs, stamina-based combat with a range of enemy types, and a handful of bosses. You also have a camp that evolves as you rescue NPCs that join the community and contribute their skills, adding to the resources you have access to, like different types of crafting and upgrades. The game's reception was originally mixed, and a lot of the complaints could be chalked up to preference, or it failing to deliver certain gameplay elements when compared specifically to Dark Souls, with the pros being the atmosphere, art direction, lore, and story, and the cons being the not-so-rewarding weapons and build variety, or lack thereof. So if you're looking for an RPG experience around 20 hours or less, and you don't mind a more stripped-down version of a Souls clone, you may want to jump into Ashen. Next up is MechWarrior 5 Clans. It's a narrative-driven first-person mech suit combat sim from a long-standing franchise I don't remember ever jumping into. Despite the name, this seems to be closer to a new game in the franchise than an expansion of the last one. It features a new story-based campaign from the side of the Smoke Jagawa clan, with up to 4-player co-op, and while the game has seen some enhancements in the visuals and environmental destruction from moving to Unreal Engine 5, the main complaints I've seen so far have been about performance and a need for optimization. The game looks like a lot of fun, but I'd recommend checking out a review from longtime players of the series to get an idea of the finer changes made since the last one, like to the UI and customization. Or you can see for yourself by playing it right now on Game Pass. Next, we have Donut County. It's a story-driven puzzle game where thieving raccoons have taken over the town with their holes, and you have to save it. There's not a lot to explain here. It's just a great indie game with a simple mechanic made more interesting by the humor and characters. It was published by Annapurna Interactive, who I think all of us indie game lovers trust as a curator of great titles from small studios, or in this case, a solo dev. Very sad to see the shakeup that happened with that company. You can read up on the news about it. I just felt compelled to mention it since Annapurna has always been at the head of my holy trinity as far as indie publishers go, the others being Devolver Digital and Raw Fury, though I am a fan of what folks like Tiny Build and Focus Entertainment put out as well. My point is that if you care about who published a game, Donut County is another wonderful little title from Annapurna, along with the aforementioned Ashen. So if you like cute puzzle games, this one may be for you. Next is South Park, the Fractured Butthole. I don't think I need to explain this one, but it's an RPG adventure game from the creators of South Park, where you play as a new kid in town, joining up with all of your favorites from the show to roleplay as superheroes and get up to the usual irreverent shenanigans. The game's reception was pretty good, with the main negatives I've seen outside of the occasional bug being that it's not as good as the Stick of Truth in terms of humor or the interface, and that the turn-based combat is more tactic style than the first game. The consensus is still that if you like the Stick of Truth, or if you're just a fan of South Park, you'll probably like Fractured Butthole. Like a few games on this list, I'll be playing it in my own time, not on the channel, and I'll let you know what I think in the comments. Next, we have Inscription, an incredible card-based roguelike with escape room mechanics, intriguing lore, and a creepy atmosphere. It's another game I feel like I don't have to explain because you've probably seen it by now, and if you haven't, it's hard to describe without spoiling anything. So I'll just say that if you like deck building, tabletop games, and are enticed by the creative addition of indie horror, then you might want to give Inscription a try. It's not easy for everyone, but it's something special that I think is worth sticking to if you have the time. Next is Mad Streets, a multiplayer party brawler similar to Gang Beasts, and you can play solo with AI companions or up to 4-player co-op, both local and online. It has a few objective-based modes, some with story content, as well as a rumble mode, which is tournament-style fighting that unlocks new characters and locations. You can also customize some matches. That said, the game's reception has been pretty bad, with complaints about the fights being over too quickly, the loading screens being too frequent and taking too long, and the overall experience being laggy with poor controls, which apparently don't include keyboard support. So if you like throwing hands in the silliest way possible, you can give Mad Streets a shot, and if it's as bad as people say, well, at least you didn't pay for it. Speaking of throwing hands, we have Sefue, the beloved martial arts beat-em-up for lovers of kung fu brawls. If you aren't familiar with the game, the hook is that your character ages every time you die, along with all the consequences that come with. And the main draw of this game is, of course, the combat, which requires you to learn and adapt to master new weapons and skills. The game now includes the Arenas expansion, which adds 5 new game modes, 15 dynamic locations, and over 100 challenges. And as a lover of martial arts who used to practice the martial arts and can't get enough of martial arts media, my regret is that I never had a chance to play Sefue when it came out. So I will be playing it now that it's on Game Pass, and if you want a focused, fun, and challenging kung fu experience, you too can become the master right now. Next is We Love Katamari Reroll. It's a remaster of We Love Katamari with new graphics from top to bottom and an overhaul of the UI. It also includes Royal Reverie, a mini expansion that allows you to play as the king of the cosmos when he was just a little prince, adding a few new challenges to the mix. It's a relatively short game, maybe 5 or 6 hours, so if you never played the original and you want a laid-back experience with a splash of the over-the-top Japanese quirk, We Love Katamari might be for thee. Next, we have Legend of Mana, a classic JRPG with a twist where you build the world map using artifacts you discover on your journey. It features real-time combat, and there are dozens of events you encounter that build out the story, but the fact that you help construct the narrative and design the world can make the story and systems feel innovative to some and nonsensical to others. It's a well-loved game that may or may not hold up for you as a modern player in terms of how it feels or how repetitive it can be, since from what I recall, you can't skip or escape enemy encounters, but the artwork and music are still lovely, and the main complaints I've seen have been from PC players having frame rate issues. Otherwise, if you're a fan of the classics from Square Enix, you may want to add Legend of Mana to your list, especially if you never got to play it. They also added Trials of Mana to Game Pass, which is a complete 3D remake of the third game in the Mana series, otherwise known as the Seiken Densetsu series, with a new musical arrangement, a new abilities mechanic, and an additional character class. And you can pick your character plus 2 companions from a total of 6, which influences the way the story plays out. It's another great RPG classic, with the main complaints being the bad voice acting and party AI in combat, though as a remake, some lovers of the game fault it for being so faithful to the original that some of the mechanics feel outdated or lacking in quality of life improvements that typically come with modernization. I'm just the messenger though, and my message is that if you like these old school RPGs, you can check out both of these entries to the Mana series right now on Game Pass. Next up is All You Need Is Help, a cube puzzle game where you work together as little cube-shaped creatures to complete objectives. It supports up to 4 players, both couch co-op and online. It has a voice feature that lets the characters communicate based on context, and the simple puzzles and controls make it great for players young and old. So if you're looking for something to play with your family and friends that hopefully won't stress you out, All You Need might be all you need. Next, we have History Untold. It's a historical grand strategy game with 4X elements from Oxide Games, a studio founded by some of the developers of Civilization V. They talk in depth about the game on its Steam page, so I'll just cover some of the basics. You can choose from dozens of important historical figures to lead with, each with their own traits and abilities that impact the gameplay. It's a simultaneous turn-based system, there's a rich economy to manage, the tech tree is non-linear, and the world is dynamic from the life of the citizens to the biomes surrounding them. You guide your empire through 12 distinct eras, but there are no preset victory paths, so you can shape your empire in your own way. There's a single-player mode, as well as a cloud-backed synchronous and asynchronous multiplayer with options for up to 36 players. And it's cross-platform between Game Pass on PC, Steam, and the Windows Store. As someone who's played a lot of them, strategy games can be very hit or miss, and the reception for this one seems mixed, with the general mood I've seen being that it has a ton of potential with a lot to love about what it's trying to do at the start, like with its immersive economy, but it quickly devolves into tedious micromanagement busywork that's no longer fun to play, with a wonky UI and a strange learning curve to the combat. So it sounds like there may be a need to improve the balancing in its systems, but don't take my word for other people's words. The best way for you to find out is to jump into Aura yourself right now. Next is one of the ones I was looking forward to most, Frostpunk 2, the post-apocalyptic survival city builder set on a winter-ravaged Earth. And while it retains some elements found in the first game, there are a lot of changes that many fans either don't like or that make it feel and play not only like a completely different game, but like a slightly different genre. As a fan of the first game who exhausted every campaign and challenge, I'm curious to jump into it. I still haven't had a chance, but I'd recommend watching some reviews to understand how the sequel is different, since those who love it and don't seem to be in agreement with each other that it's not like Frostpunk. It's more like a bigger strategy game set in the Frostpunk universe. A common take I've seen is that Frostpunk centered around the smaller scaled, intimate micromanagement of resources and events that made the game feel like a race against time and every casualty feel like a personal loss, which I absolutely agree with. While the sequel focuses more on building up your civilization while navigating factions and managing resources on a scale that's more detached from the original tone and emotional investment, alongside an experience that feels less custom, with mechanics that feel more automated or stripped down despite additions in other areas. There are also complaints about the UI design and reports of performance issues in later chapters, though not enough to drag down the reception of the game, which has still been positive overall. Normally, I'd list specific features and mechanics, but given that Frostpunk 2 is so polarizing in how far it strays from the original with its mechanics, I don't want to rely on how those features are described by someone else, so I'll instead say that if you never played the first game, expect a lot of elements you're used to in city builders, like gathering resources, researching new tech, establishing laws, and keeping your citizens happy. But if you have played the first game, go into this follow-up open to something new. Next, we've got Wargroove II. It's a turn-based pixel art strategy game, most heavily compared to Advance Wars. You choose from a set of commanders to fight your way through 3 intertwined story-based campaigns, and each commander has a special skill called a groove that you can unleash during battles. There's a new roguelike single-player mode, and an in-game editor that allows you to create custom maps, campaigns, and cutscenes that you can play through or share. You can fight with up to 4 players, versus or co-op, locally or online, and you can customize the rules of battle. In stark contrast with the last entry on this list, the main complaint about this sequel is that it's just the first game again, only worse. Many players agree that the core gameplay is one-to-one, just with some things expanded, like adding new commanders and units and a way to supercharge the groove ability, but that it suffers in terms of writing, pacing, and having some features from the original removed. This is another one where I'd recommend diving into discussions about it if you don't want to jump into it yourself first. Again, I'm just the messenger, so I want to stress for anyone new that the point of this series is just to list the games added to Game Pass. I only throw some of the feedback I've seen into the mix to make sure you're aware of it in case you're interested, not to serve as an actual review. So whether you dive into Wargroove 2 or not is up to you. Next is Riders Republic, which Ubisoft describes as an open-world sports paradise, though it's more arcade-style than something like Steep. You can hop in with up to 50 players on boards, skis, bikes, even wingsuits, and compete in massive multiplayer races, mastering tricks, or tackling career mode. You can also explore some real locations like US national parks, keeping in mind that the rides you get depend on the content you own. The reception to this game has been really great since it released a few years ago, and has been touted as a ton of fun across the board with beautiful environments and smooth controls. But it is a game with seasonal content, which means microtransactions, exclusives that are annoying to get, then DLC you have to pay for that you probably feel like you shouldn't. It is Ubisoft after all, so if you enjoy action sports and want to kick back and grind for progression and on rails, Riders Republic sounds like a solid experience. Next is Expeditions, a mud runner game. It's an off-road sim where you lead research missions into different environments, either alone or online with up to 4 players. It's got familiar physics-based gameplay. You can build a camp, hire specialists with different skills, and obtain new tools, structures, and vehicles, all to help execute your plans effectively. Vehicles can also be customized, and completing missions successfully allows you to unlock new upgrades and more. Most of the feedback I've seen on this game is from longtime players of the series, and a recurring opinion is that compared to games like SnowRunner, it's several steps back, especially with the mission structure being more restrictive. Console players also had a lot of performance issues. I haven't played any of these games, they're not really my cup of tea, so I can neither confirm nor deny, but I haven't seen a single person say that this isn't the worst game of that series, so do with that information what you will. Next up, we've got Age of Mythology Retold. It's a remake of the popular real-time strategy game Age of Mythology, rebuilt from the ground up in the Bang engine, same as the last game, and I think the definitive edition of Age of Empires 3. For those new to the series, it's what you'd expect from a historical RTS, only with mythical creatures and lore. Giants in Midgard? Check. Mummies smacking you down like Brendan Fraser? Check. There are several campaigns that span 50 missions, dozens of randomly generated maps, and you can play against others or AI. The game does have crossplay between Xbox and PC, including Steam, and keep in mind that for most new releases, when I say that it's available on Xbox, I mean that it's playable on next gen, but on Xbox One, you'd have to use cloud gaming. Reception to Retold has been pretty great, with the main complaints I've seen here and there being occasional crashes on console or connection issues with multiplayer. Now, I know I've said it before, but I'll say it again, I love real-time strategy games, so I hate that I don't have time to play them like I did back in the day, but if you have the time, why not tussle with the gods and give Age of Mythology Retold a try? Getting close to the end, which is great because in case you can't tell, there's something weird going on with my voice, and I also sound kind of like AI for some reason. But we've got Star Trucker, which is exactly what it sounds like, a trucking sim in space. You haul cargo, scavenge and trade, you can customize and upgrade your rig, use the map to plan out your routes, and pick up side gigs from chatter on the radio. It's worth mentioning that you warp to the main locations, similar to that Everspace game I played a bit of on and off the channel, so don't expect a trucking sim like you'd get on land where you're traversing the terrain the entire way. It's more like a mix of driving and fast traveling. And there are some complaints, like the resource management pushing it more towards survival in a way that might not be as fun if you'd rather just kick back and make your deliveries without worrying about dying. Or the controls being cumbersome, though the consensus there is that you should be playing it with a controller, and if you can't, you just have to deal with it or not play. At least for now. I will say the game does seem like a labor of love from a two-person team, and players are enjoying it so far for being refreshing, even if it does need more time in the oven for better economy balancing and controls. Either way, if you like the idea of a trucking sim in space, you can strap into Star Trucker right now on Game Pass. Next, we have Core Keeper, a pixel art, open world, survival crafting, you get the point kind of game. It's basically a mining sandbox adventure where you build and explore to unearth an ancient world, and it includes everything you'd expect from a game of this type: crafting, mining, combat, farming, fishing, music playing, cooking, automation, and even raising animals. You can upgrade and unlock new abilities, battle bosses, discover rare loot, and all with up to 8 players in what I call Dido Co-op, which stands for drop in, drop out, meaning that online players can drop in and out of your game seamlessly without having to jump through hoops. Reception to the game has been so amazing that I can't even think of any complaints I've seen about it. Maybe a few issues with rubber banding in multiplayer, and even that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about. It also brings together so many elements that lovers of games like Minecraft, Stardew Valley, and Terraria gravitate towards that it makes sense that it's universally loved. The only thing keeping me from jumping into it more is knowing how much of a time sink it's going to be, because I adore games like this, and if it looks like your cup of tea, all signs point to you loving Core Keeper as well. Next is Atlas Fallen, and if you aren't aware, I always go backwards in these lists, starting with the games added most recently, so as we reach the end, I'll probably be mentioning games you've known about for a while. But this one is a story-driven action RPG where you traverse a world of sand and magic, defeating legendary monsters either alone or co-op. To avoid any confusion, Atlas Fallen Reign of Sand is a free update to the base game that's also included with Game Pass, so that's what I'm linking to and describing here. From the base game, Reign of Sand expanded the world, added new enemies, new quests, new voice acting, an updated campaign and progression system, new game plus, and more. So if you're going to play Atlas Fallen, make sure you're playing with the Reign of Sand patch. This is one of those games that feels AA, where it doesn't have the splash of a AAA title, but it also transcends what you'd get from a smaller indie game, and that has people on the fence about what to expect from it. So I'm going to leave this one up to you to watch reviews that go more in depth about it, especially the co-op, which the devs put out a video explaining, because the pros and cons are kind of all over the place, even among the people who enjoy it. I haven't jumped into it that much yet, but I just get that Forspoken vibe, where there's a lot there for some, and nothing at all there for others. Only this has definitely been better received than Forspoken, especially with the patch. It just has a similar range of complaints, except in this case, the complaints about the character aren't that they're too annoying, but maybe that they're too bland. Either way, that's the beauty of a Game Pass membership. You can check out a game, and if you love it, that's great, but if you don't, you didn't spend anything extra on it except time. So if you've got time and you want to see what Atlas Fallen Reign of Sand is all about, you can play it right now on GP. Heading into the home stretch, we've got Creatures of Ava, a creature collecting adventure game where you explore different environments, saving the inhabitants from the withering. There are 4 distinct ecosystems, over 20 creatures to tame, and the combat focuses on helping the creatures you encounter rather than killing them. Basically, it's a narrative-driven journey of empathy and understanding, teaching you about yourself and your relationship with nature. It's one of those cozy indie games, around 10 hours plus, and I guarantee that you can tell if it's for you or not just from looking at it. I know I'm going to play it at some point, though I may not play it on the channel just because of the length, which really sucks to say, but that's the reality of YouTube for me now, and I think for a lot of people. If I'm gonna play anything longer than 3 hours or so on the channel anymore, it needs to be something I'm so passionate about that I don't care if no one watches it. I just want to share it with the world. Otherwise, I'm no longer wasting my time recording and editing for days or weeks only to get 30 views. It's not worth it, despite the depths to which I appreciate the 30 views I get. You guys who actually watch my videos are amazing for doing so. And I know there's a lot more of you who watch this series, but I'm talking about the people who watch my quote-unquote Let's Plays. Back to the game though, as a heads up if you don't have have Game Pass, or you decide to get Creatures of Ava on Steam instead, it is Steam Deck verified, which means it works really well on the Steam Deck right out of the gate. No tweaking required. The rest of this list really needs no explanation, so we can speed through it. We've got the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, which includes the original Crash Bandicoot, the sequel Cortex Strikes Back, and the third game Warped, all remastered. It also includes the Stormy Ascent level, which was previously unreleased, and a new level built just for the trilogy. Then we've got Mafia, the Definitive Edition, which is a remake of the original, not a remaster. In my opinion, as someone coming from film, a remaster is taking the original of something and making a copy using more advanced technology or techniques to improve the image and sound, and in the case of games, maybe the controls. While a remake is making another version of a thing, and that's more of what you have here. So it keeps some things from the original while changing others, like some of the missions and characterization. It expands the story, adds motorcycles, has new voice acting, tweaks the mechanics, etc. Many say the original is better, but whether that's just their nostalgia talking or not is up to you. We've also got the Doom bundle, which includes Doom 1 and 2, TNT Evolution 2, the Plutonia Experiment, the master levels for Doom 2, No Rest for the Living, Sigil, and Legacy of Rust. And do not ask me to explain which ones are expansions versus episodes, you can look that up. The bundle includes a new deathmatch pack with 26 maps, online crossplay for deathmatch and co-op for up to 16 players, that requires a Bethesda net account, and local split screen for up to 4. There have also been improvements to accessibility and performance, some new soundtrack options, and other quality of life bits you can explore on your own, especially with mods on PC. And we got Overwatch 2, it's Overwatch 2. We also got Train Sim World 5, which I've covered previous entries of here, so if you like simulators and are curious about driving different trains all over the world, this might be a good series for you. We also got MLB The Show 2024, and if you're thinking that you already heard me talk about it, you're not confused, I did, but this is specifically the console edition for Xbox One. The previous editions they added were for next gen. And of course, we got the biggin, Call of Duty Black Ops 6, which so far is one of the best COD games to come out recently, while still having a lot of flaws. What else is new? I also want to briefly mention 2 games that I left out of the last Uncovered episode because I was going to play them on the channel, but I ended up changing my mind because of time constraints. Have a Nice Death, which is a beautiful 2D action roguelike, and The Rewinder, a pixel art puzzle adventure game based on Chinese folklore with a time rewinding mechanic. It's a pretty game, but one of the main complaints is that you can't skip cutscenes when you restart from checkpoints. I'll post a link to every game in the box so you can check them out. And please let me know if you've been looking forward to anything here or if you've already been playing them. You can give other people your feedback in the comments. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you back here soon with more Uncovered.